No drum kit, hotel room, clothing store, or small British village escaped the mischief of the drummer. Keith Moon from The Who was not only the world's greatest drummer, he was also the greatest prankster in rock and roll history. The man known as Moon the Loon died on September 7, 1978, in his London apartment at the age of 32. Today, we're going to explore the life and death of Keith Moon. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. Keith Moon was born on August 23, 1946. Despite his early inclination towards music, he didn't receive drumsticks for his first birthday. Initially, he tried learning the bugle but found it quite challenging. Consequently, he switched to drums, which he found easier, albeit more expensive. At 14, Moon left school and took a job as a radio repairman to save enough money for a drum kit. Influenced by drummers like Gene Krupa, DJ Fontana, and Tony Meehan, Moon took lessons and developed a unique style rooted in jazz, R&B, and surf music. He played in various local bands for a few years. In April 1964, at 17, he auditioned to replace Doug Sandham in The Who. Moon's audition was unplanned. He attended a show where The Who used a session drummer to replace Sandham. Moon approached the stage, claiming he could play better, and was allowed to drum during the second half of the gig. Despite nearly destroying the drum kit, he was invited to play at their next gig, solidifying his place in the band. Moon humorously remarked that he spent 15 years just filling in, but his distinctive drumming style became essential to The Who's identity. Before Keith Moon joined The Who, rock drumming was generally more subdued. Drummers typically maintained a steady beat in the background, as seen in the styles of Charlie Watts from the Rolling Stones and Ringo Starr from the Beatles. However, Moon's rapid drum rolls and wild cymbal crashes, combined with Pete Townshend's powerful guitar chords and John Entwistle's intense bass lines, revolutionizing rock drumming. Roger Daltrey, The Who's lead singer, acknowledged Moon's unique blend of various styles, describing his performance on I Can See for Miles as incredible. Daltrey likened Moon's drumming to a steam locomotive at full speed, highlighting his remarkable speed. Tony Fletcher, author of the biography Moon, the Life and Death of a Rock Legend, noted that Keith was the first to treat drums as a lead instrument. Despite his innovative style, Moon could be frustrating for his bandmates. Entwistle mentioned that Moon's tempo varied with his mood, leading many critics to question his timekeeping, a fundamental role for drummers. Critics, however, often misunderstood drumming, as they did with the character Animal. Moon's bandmates never doubted his contribution to their sound. Daltrey once remarked that Moon instinctively placed drum fills in spots others wouldn't consider. While drumming was Moon's first passion, he also loved practical jokes, though opinions on his humor varied. Notably, Moon had a penchant for destroying hotel rooms. Keith Moon found his antics hilarious, though the hotel staff tasked with cleaning up after him likely didn't share his sense of humor. Some jokes just don't land with everyone. One of Moon's most infamous pranks occurred during The Who's legendary appearance on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, where he almost blew up his bandmates. While that might sound like an exaggeration, it's not far from the truth. Moon had a habit of placing small explosive charges in his bass drum, which he would detonate when Pete Townshend smashed his guitar at the end of a set. The two shared a paradoxical disdain for musical instruments. On this particular occasion, however, Moon used significantly more explosives than usual, which, unsurprisingly, led to chaos. During the band's performance of My Generation, Moon detonated the charge, resulting in an explosive disaster akin to those gender reveal parties that accidentally set backyards ablaze. Roger Daltrey was blown off the stage, and Pete Townshend emerged from the smoke missing half his hair. The explosion also briefly blinded the TV cameras and caused actress Bette Davis, who was backstage, to faint. Keith Moon's antics weren't limited to mindless destruction. He also enjoyed more elaborate pranks. In 1968, while The Who was touring with The Herd, which included guitarist Peter Frampton, Moon's mischief extended to Frampton's bandmates, though Frampton himself somehow escaped his pranks. One notable prank involved wiring keyboardist Andy Brown's instrument with firecrackers, which Moon detonated remotely while Brown was trying to perform. This was calculated destruction rather than mindless chaos. In another instance, Moon attached a pulley to drummer Andy Steele's gong, pulling it out of reach whenever Steele tried to strike it, a prank that was undeniably humorous. However, Moon's sense of humor sometimes crossed the line from relatively harmless pranks to tasteless attempts to shock. He occasionally dressed as a vicar and shouted obscenities at elderly women. In one particularly offensive incident, he drove his convertible through a predominantly Jewish neighborhood while wearing a Nazi uniform. These actions were far from funny and certainly not cool Keith. If there was one thing Keith Moon loved more than practical jokes and music, it was partying. During The Who's early years, Moon developed a severe addiction to amphetamines. He once joked in an interview that his favorite food was French blues, the slang term for Dexamyl, a drug containing sodium amobarbital and dextroamphetamine sulfate. Moon was also a regular at London clubs such as the Bag and Nails and the Speakeasy. Over time, his drinking habits escalated into full-blown alcoholism, and the combination of alcohol and pills began to impair his ability to perform. For instance, during a concert in California on the Quadrophenia Tour, Moon consumed a mix of tranquilizers and brandy. He passed out on stage while playing Won't Get Fooled Again. Though briefly revived, he passed out again later during Magic Bus. The band had to remove him from the stage, and Pete Townshend asked the audience if anyone could play the drums, a situation reminiscent of how they originally found Moon. In another incident at the Boston Garden in 1976, Moon passed out after playing just 2 songs, forcing the band to stop and reschedule the show. By 1977, Keith Moon was struggling with his weight and finding it increasingly difficult to get through shows. His erratic and unreliable drumming during the recording of the album, Who Are You, reportedly led Pete Townshend to threaten to fire him if he didn't quit drinking. Although Roger Daltrey later denied that they ever threatened to fire Moon, the album would ultimately be his last. In 1978, Moon moved into Flat 12 of 9 Curzon Place, the same apartment where Cass Elliot of the Mamas and the Papas had died 4 years earlier. Moon rented the apartment from singer Harry Nilsson, who believed it to be cursed, though apparently not too cursed to rent out. To help with alcohol withdrawal, Moon was prescribed heminivrin, a sedative. He was instructed to take a pill whenever he felt withdrawal symptoms, but no more than 3 a day. However, true to his nature, Moon ended up consuming the entire bottle. According to Pete Townshend, Keith Moon had a habit of taking pills by the handful. On September 6th of that year, Moon and his girlfriend Annette Walter-Lax attended a preview of the film The Buddy Holly Story as guests of Paul and Linda McCartney. Before the screening, McCartney hosted a party at the Covent Garden Diner in Peppermint Park to celebrate what would have been Buddy Holly's 42nd birthday. Guests at the party later recalled that Moon appeared sober and in unusually good spirits. However, Moon left halfway through the movie and returned home to watch The Abominable Dr. Phibes on television instead, perhaps not convinced by Gary Busey's portrayal of Buddy Holly. At around 4:00 a.m., Moon took another handful of heminivrin. By 7:30 a.m., he woke up and asked Annette to cook him some food. When she refused, an irate Moon reportedly said, "If you don't like it, you can off." Tragically, those would be his last words. Walter-Lax found his body when she woke up later that afternoon. The 32-year-old drummer was pronounced dead from a heminivrin overdose at Middlesex Hospital. Keith Moon's death deeply affected his friends, bandmates, and associates. His reckless lifestyle ultimately caught up with him. In an interview with People magazine years later, Pete Townshend reflected, "I was obsessed with trying to keep Keith alive. It was quite clear that he was on a downward slide, and there was very little I could do." Manager Bill Kerbishley shared similar sentiments, saying, "Keith was never going to grow old gracefully. I don't think he was destined to make old bones. I suppose he was designed in such a way to be remembered as he was." After Moon's passing, The Who hired Kenny Jones, formerly of Faces, as their new drummer. While Townshend believed Jones was one of the few capable of filling Moon's shoes, Roger Daltrey felt Jones's style didn't suit the band. Jones left in 1988 and was succeeded by Simon Phillips and later Zach Starkey, Ringo Starr's son. Starkey had once received a drum kit from Moon, whom he knew as Uncle Keith. While this was a touching gift, it also meant someone thought it was a good idea to invite Keith Moon to a child's birthday party, just as long as he stayed away from the cake and the piñata. Keith Moon is often hailed as the greatest rock drummer in history, and his impact on the genre is undeniable. He has influenced legendary drummers such as Neil Peart of Rush, Roger Taylor of Queen, Ginger Baker of Cream, Mitch Mitchell of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and John Bonham of Led Zeppelin. Fortunately, none of these greats felt the need to emulate Moon's explosive antics with their drum kits. So, what do you think? What's your favorite song by The Who? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from Melodic Memoirs.